Hey, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have another case, as you saw in the title, and it's about Alissa Turney. I don't have any announcements to make at the moment, so my social media is over here on the side, and let's get started with the video. Actually, I do want to make an introduction that's directly related to the case. And that's that this story didn't get the attention it truly deserved. At the time, there were a few reports. Let's say it got minimal attention, but the police didn't get involved, and you'll see why. So the case basically went cold, and it stayed that way for many years, until now when Alissa's sister, Sarah, has started reaching out to YouTubers to spread the story. In fact, there are several channels that have interviews with her, and I'll be leaving a link below to the Lord and Arts channel, which I've already recommended here before, so you can get a better understanding of the story's context. There are things there that I can't explain in this video, since I try to keep my videos from getting too long, and, well, that interview is about an hour long. I want to emphasize then that this platform is bringing attention to cases that have been lost over time. And this one isn't even that old. I mean, it happened in 2001, so just imagine, if it weren't for Alissa's sister, all this information would still be lost out there. Especially considering the personal perspective she brings to this case as a family member. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the investigation, and please, pay close attention because there are some details here and there that aren't in any particular order. The person you're seeing right now is Alissa Turney. At the time of the events, she was a 17-year-old teenager, born on April 3rd, 1984. Her parents were Mike Turney and Barbara Turney. Mike had 3 children before marrying Barbara, and Barbara had 2. So when they got together, they formed a sort of blended family, which also included Alissa. The family describes her as a very active and social person, though somewhat problematic, mostly because she preferred hanging out with her friends over going to school and studying. Which honestly isn't all that unusual for a 17-year-old girl. It's just that Mike exaggerated all of this a bit over the years. It's also worth mentioning that she was loud and apparently didn't like rules. She liked parties, skipping class, and drinking alcohol, even though she was underage. Sarah, who is 4 years younger than Alissa, says she was a really bad sister. I mean, Alissa treated her a little badly, but it was mostly just normal sister stuff. Basically, they fought like any siblings do. That's how she remembers her. And even though Alissa was a bit mean to her sister, they got along in the sense that they supported each other. Mainly because there's something I need to clarify. Barbara, their mother, died when Alissa was 9 years old. In other words, they were both very young and she died of lung cancer. So it's clear that, even though they didn't always get along, they still had to support each other. Alissa went to high school at Paradise Valley High School and worked at a Jack in the Box, which is a very well-known restaurant. Remember what I told you before? We're only basing this on what Mike said about Alissa's personality. It's up to you to decide whether you really believe she was kind of a rebellious person after watching the video. So let's get to the facts. This happened on May 21st, 2001. Alissa woke up like any other day. She got her things ready and headed to school. The thing is, on this particular morning, Mike drove her. Everything is normal up to this point. Mike drops her off at the middle school, she goes to class, nothing happens. That day, Alissa attends school. And this is where the problem actually starts. That day, at noon, Mike comes to pick her up from school, supposedly to go have lunch. And honestly, this detail seems strange to those discussing the case online. In fact, if you go to forums, you can find all kinds of discussions about why this was wrong and why it was really strange. Those discussing it mainly wonder why he picked her up. Why would he do that? And the truth is, it was her last day of school, so it wasn't unusual at all for him to pick her up. They were just gonna grab something to eat. Kinda like a celebration that she finished school, you know? It's something normal, at least to me. Something that could happen to me too. And here again, the information gets a bit divided. Some people said they went to a restaurant to eat, and others said they went home. The thing is, they picked up some food and went back home. And that's where a little argument started. The argument was about the times Alissa was allowed to go out. She wanted to leave without having to let anyone know, without worrying about curfews or anything like that. And her dad told her that she couldn't really do that she had to let them know, because as long as she lived under his roof, he was gonna worry. Now, what he says happened next is that she went to her room, he left her there, and went to look for Sarah, his other daughter. And this is where Sarah's new testimony comes in, the one I mentioned we have because she's trying to expand on the story. What Sarah says is that her father told her he was coming to get her, and at that moment, she was smoking with some friends. This is important, since the first rule of the house, the only one she had to follow, was simply not to smoke. And this was because Barbara, her mother, had died of lung cancer from smoking. Since it was such an important rule, and Sarah only realized this recently, she remembers spraying herself with perfume, worried that her father would find out. However, when she got in the car, it didn't seem to bother him. He didn't even seem to notice. The only thing he did was seem a little nervous because he couldn't find Alissa, or rather, because he couldn't get in touch with her. So once Sarah was in the car with her father, he told her to call her sister to find out where she was, since she wasn't answering him. Sarah called her sister and got no answer. They arrive at the house, and the first thing Sarah does is go to her sister's room to see if she was there. When she opens the door, she finds that not only was it empty, but Alyssa's phone was also in the closet. While searching the room, she then realizes there was a supposed note left by Alissa. And right now, I'm gonna read it to you. You also have it on the screen so you can see exactly how she wrote it. This is an important detail. For Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided that I'm really going to California. Sarah, you said you didn't want me around. Yeah, done it. I'm leaving. That's why I saved up money. Dad, I took $300 from you. In fact, if you're a fan of true crime cases, you probably already realized that the first question you have to ask is whether this letter is really from Alissa. Well, supposedly it's from her. The thing is, there's a lot of debate online about whether that's actually the case. The main comparison is with another note that was found in the room, which was also written by Allison. In this one, as you can see on the screen, there's a noticeable difference, mainly in how the letters are written. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but some people point out right away that there's a difference in the way the letter A is written. And now, obviously, I'm not an expert in this. I don't have any real knowledge about the subject, but I understand that it's important to check that the letters are written in the same way. Because even though we can see that the style is similar, that is, the letters are rounded, even so, for example, if the way the little leg of the letter is written is different, it might not be hers. We can't completely imitate someone else's handwriting. It's pretty difficult. For example, if I look at my own handwriting, it's really varied. I write everything in print, but I switch a lot between lowercase and uppercase when it comes to print letters. Honestly, my handwriting's a mess. I write the letter A differently every time, the R too, always switching between lowercase and uppercase, regardless of whether I actually need a capital or a lowercase letter. There you have it, literally. At the beginning, where it says intro, there's a lowercase r, and here there's an uppercase R. So based on this, there are pages and pages discussing whether the note really belongs to Alissa or not. You can draw your own conclusions, of course. I don't know if there's anyone who knows a bit more in the comments. If you want to let me know. If you see any difference between the two notes, I'd love to hear it. And that would be helpful, honestly. Anything helps at this point, since Sarah was told she had to go directly to the media, to social networks, to find out more. Literally. You'll see why in a moment. We also know that she wasn't very happy living in that house. So she could have written that note at any point in her life, and someone might have left it there on purpose. It easily could have not been Alissa who left it there. Maybe at some point she wanted to leave, wrote the note, and then ended up not leaving. But that's not all. There's also a big discrepancy. And the thing is, the note itself says she decided to leave in the morning. How is it that she decided to leave in the morning? She specifically wrote in the note that she made the decision at that moment, and then she was going to argue with her father. First of all, if she had already made up her mind, then she shouldn't have even been arguing. She should have been happy, thinking she was about to leave, that she didn't need any rules or anything, because she could just grab her stuff and go. She already had everything planned out. If anything, she would have written in the note that after the argument, she realized she wanted to leave, for example, right? And on top of that, after asking her friends, it was confirmed that she had a party that night, that she wanted to go to that party, and that she had told those friends she was gonna go. Honestly, at that moment, Sarah thought this was something normal, that she would come back that night, or maybe just come back the next morning at the latest, and that it was no big deal, that apparently she had gotten upset, which is normal, and that she was probably at a friend's house. At this point, the father, supposedly, according to him, calls Alyssa's friends, calls her boyfriend, calls everyone she knows, but no one knew anything. It was only 5 hours later that he called the police, and they treated it as a case where she wasn't missing, but rather had left on her own. All of this was based on the attitude she supposedly had, according to Mike, the argument, and also the note. But let me remind you of something. She was 17 years old at this time. She was a minor. I mean, regardless of what they thought, I think they should have looked for her. And I really don't know what the laws were at that time, or how the police handle these cases. But she was 17, she was a minor. You can't just let her go like that. There are other cases where people go missing, let's say, but since they're adults, they're told, well, you can leave whenever you want. In this case, you can't defend it the same way, since she wasn't an adult. On top of that, Alissa had quite a bit of money in the bank at that time. She had $1,800, which she had saved up. Also, as the note says, she had her own money, even though she borrowed $300. The thing is, at the bank where she had the $1,800, no one had made any transactions. No one had withdrawn any money, and it seems like no one ever took anything out again. There hasn't been any activity all these years. If she was gonna run away, why didn't she take all that money first? Why did she leave all her savings there? She left with $300 from her father and survived all this time like that. If the idea was to leave and not get caught, obviously she wasn't gonna be withdrawing money out of nowhere in the middle of her escape. But before leaving, she could have taken it all out, completely. Even just a few hours after she left, Sarah pointed out a big difference in Mike's relationships. Sarah was the favorite who had everything going for her and no rules, except for not smoking, which she broke anyway, while Alissa had everything against her. Mike seemed to have an obsession, as he wasn't even acting like a father anymore. He let Sarah get away with everything, but with Alissa, he was constantly keeping an eye on her. And by keeping an eye on her, I mean literally following her every move. He would even go to her workplace to check if she was actually there. He would go watch her while she worked. She also points out that there was a big difference between Sarah at 17 and Alissa at 17. At that age, Sarah could go out with her friends, she could go drinking, she could have her boyfriend over at the house. Honestly, and I mean it, she was like the favorite because Alissa was never allowed to do any of those things. Sarah even says that Mike gave her a freezer, a mini freezer full of beer. And we're saying, well, okay, Alissa wasn't allowed to drink. She was 17, obviously. You wouldn't let your underage kid drink, but you can see the huge difference between the two. Alissa wasn't allowed to do anything, and Sarah was always allowed to do everything. At that time, Alissa had a boyfriend, and he later came forward to say that she had told him she had been abused. She confessed to him that one day Mike picked her up early from school, took her to an empty place, and abused her there. But if that were the only testimony about this, then we'd just think the boyfriend wanted attention and nothing more. But that's not the case. One of Alicia's former teachers said the same thing. She said that at some point, Alissa had mentioned something like that when she was younger. Some of her friends also said that she had told them something like that she had told them she had been abused. None of these people reported what happened, but what we can say is that if so many people knew about this, we can start to speculate. I would consider it more true than false. Although I can't confirm anything and I'm not gonna confirm anything, I'm just telling you about the speculations that are out there. In the interviews he gave, Mike says that he was the one who took care of everything, the one who took care of looking for his daughter. He also says that a week after the disappearance, around 5 o'clock a.m., early in the morning, a call came to the house that he answered half asleep, and on the line, it was Allison. Allison started talking to him, started insulting him, and then hung up. He also says that he called the police to ask if they could trace that call, and they told him no. I suppose all of this must have raised some doubts for you, but there are still worse things to come. On one occasion, Mike's nephew, David, stayed at the house for 6 months. And it turns out that one day, when he was coming home from work pretty late, everyone was already asleep and he decided he'd watch a VHS tape. I guess he was expecting it to be a regular movie, so he grabbed one of those tapes, labeled Dr. Dolittle, like the movie, and found something pretty strange. When the tape started playing, he realized it was mostly homemade, and it showed a girl lying on a couch wearing only shorts. That was all she had on. In the same tape, Mike appeared, covering her face with a newspaper. What David says is that even though her face was covered, he knew it was Alissa. He also found another tape with someone else who seemed to be a friend of Alissa, according to him, because again, Mike was covering her face, so he decided to grab all his things and leave. He just left without saying a word. Obviously, Mike was asked about this. They asked him if David had really found tapes that disturbed him so much he wanted to leave. Mike said that actually he had kicked him out and that he was a drunk who had been driving drunk and that's why he kicked him out of the house. Again, you can believe whatever you want. The case went cold for quite a while until 5 years later in 2006, a convict named Thomas Hammer said that he had killed Alissa Turney. This person's record is that he had been convicted of killing a girl and had already been in prison for 3 years. But that's not all. He had also confessed to killing other girls, and among them was JC Lee Dugard. At that time, no one knew where JC was, so they kind of believed him, or at least hoped to believe him in order to get information out of him. But now we know that JC was actually being held captive somewhere else by another person, so all of that was really a lie. In fact, I made a video about that case. If you want to check it out, it's up on the screen. Anyway, during the police interrogation, he managed to identify Alissa, so for a while they believed him. The thing is, as they kept asking him questions and running tests, they realized that basically he was just making a lot of things up. Thomas said he had met Alissa in 2001 in Phoenix and that she was a heroin addict, which the family would have known because it would have been hard to hide. Like I said before, they realized pretty quickly that he was lying and dropped the whole thing with Thomas right there. The thing is, after 5 years, they had finally started to take action. The police were finally interested in the case. They finally stopped thinking she was just someone who had left of her own free will. However, I can't help but point out the fact that they literally missed out on a ton of evidence. DNA, things that disappear over time, security cameras from the school, from traffic lights, from the streets, from the houses nearby. A ton of things they could have checked at the time and that, well, 5 years later just weren't gonna be there. Speaking of security cameras, it's also worth mentioning that Mike had an entire security system at his house, which, according to Sarah, had started out as something pretty innocent, in a way. He had installed cameras outside the house, but it ended up being not so normal after all. He had put cameras inside the house and even had a hidden camera in the vent. Sarah says Mike once showed her a photo of her sister making out with her boyfriend on the couch. He'd been recording Alissa in her own home. Just to be clear, it's not normal to have cameras inside your house. It's normal at the entrance, garage, or yard, not inside, and definitely not pointing at specific spots like a couch. Besides this, it's also important to mention that Mike recorded every call that came into the house. He had a whole automated system set up to record the calls. And after Alissa disappeared, Sarah moved to another room in the house where she had full control over the cameras. Mike gave her that control, and when she told him to remove the camera that was in the vent, he did it. He also gave her a detector to find out if there was any surveillance near her. But if you're a little curious, you might be wondering what happened with the cameras on the day of the disappearance. There were cameras inside the house, so you could see the fight, you could see Alissa going to her room, and so on. The first time Mike was asked, he said the cameras weren't on that day. And once the detectives found out about this and asked him for the recordings, he said he had already watched them, that there was nothing on them, and that's why he got rid of them. In other words, the investigators wanted to know at least something. It didn't matter if they were from that day, but at least they could find out other things by seeing the inside of the house. For some reason, Mike had gotten rid of the tape. Mike Turney was a deputy in the 70s. And this is important to mention, since many people speculate that he would know a lot about how these cases work, how some laws work, how someone could simply make a person disappear. As I said before, calls from the house were recorded automatically. So they also wondered where the call supposedly made by Alissa at 5 a.m. was. Where she insulted Mike. It never showed out. Mike refused. He's suspicious. He wasn't even cooperative with the police. He didn't seem to want to find his daughter. It seemed like he had an obsession with her, and plus, it looked like he was hiding things. I should mention that he sold the family car a year after the disappearance. In other cases, just to be clear, the family car, the suspect's car, completely disappears, gets set on fire, or is sold after a while, or they don't let anyone inspect it until it's sold. The family also said there were two family SUVs, and they never saw the second one. Like, they didn't even know where that SUV was. Only Mike knew. So, you might be wondering, at what point did Sarah realize that maybe her father was hiding things from her? Because, let's say she was the favorite, but she was also the one they kept the most secrets from. It turns out that the news network ABC News made a sort of documentary about the case, and Sarah saw it. In it, she discovered several things she didn't know, like the fact that Mike had taken her sister out to lunch at noon on the day she disappeared. She didn't know that. Literally, Mike hadn't told her anything until the documentary came out. And that's also where she found out about the abuse. Now, the part about the lunch was real, because the part about the abuse wasn't gonna be. But I'll point this out. She knew nothing about what happened in that house. Mike hid everything from her. When this came out, Mike said his excuse for picking the girl up wasn't just the last day of school, but that she didn't want to see her boyfriend. So she asked him to pick her up so she could avoid him, but that was quickly contradicted because the boyfriend literally stated that he saw her, that Alissa went to his classroom to tell him she was leaving. So what kind of avoiding is that? Turns out Mike didn't seem happy at all about Alyssa's relationship with her boyfriend. In fact, some people say he was a little jealous. An example of strange behavior is that he recorded them while they were arguing and gave that tape to the police as justification that maybe he had made her disappear. I mean, someone could record me arguing with my partner and it wouldn't matter, it wouldn't prove anything. The only thing it proves is that he's obsessive. He literally recorded his daughter arguing with her boyfriend. For what? Did he expect something? Did he need that tape? Why obsess over recording her? Because literally, he was obsessed with her. He never recorded Sarah. He never intentionally set up a camera to watch her. But with Alissa, yes, literally, the cameras inside the house were there to watch her. And over these years, something pretty dangerous happened. The police go looking for Mike, and when they find him, it turns out he was carrying weapons. On December 11th, the police search him and find that he was carrying firearms and explosives. You might be wondering, for what, right? By the way, inside the house, he also had more bombs. Well, it turns out he had a little problem with the place where he used to work. He was working as an electrician somewhere, I'm not exactly sure where, but it turns out he was complaining about being treated badly, about poor working conditions, and so on. And when Alissa disappeared, he blamed the people who were employing him for having done something to her. He had already told some acquaintances about this. He had already said that maybe they had done something to Alissa. Beyond that, the police not only found bombs inside the house, but they also discovered this person's diary. In it, he wrote that the people who had hired him had done something to Alissa, and he also confessed to having killed two of Alissa's murderers. Supposedly, he also knew what had happened to her, that they had taken her to the California desert and buried her there. My non-professional opinion is that he had some kind of serious mental issue. Inside the house, they not only found the bombs and this diary confessing very strange things, but they also found multi-page contracts that Mike had made Alissa sign, stating that he had never abused her. He made her sign a contract that literally said he had never abused her. I'm repeating it because I just don't get it. So, well, Sarah, after seeing all this from the police investigation and watching the ABC documentary, realized that it really didn't make sense to support her father, whom she had believed in up until that point. There's also the fact that he had actually said before that he got along very badly with the people who hired him, and that he even received threats over the phone. So in that sense, she believed him, until she suddenly saw the ABC thing. She definitely thought he had done something to her sister. She tried to talk to Mike, tried to ask him what had happened, tried to get him to confess, but Mike would just laugh in her face. He even told her that he would confess on his deathbed. The family believes that, in fact, he did something to Alissa, and they have a specific theory that he took her from school that day, took her to the desert to abuse her, that Alissa resisted, and that's when he decided to kill her. For the record, this place had been searched before, but there were bones. In other words, they found bones, but that couldn't prove that it was really Alissa. The body wasn't decomposed or anything, the bones didn't prove anything at that time, so it's not known if that's really what happened. Sarah points out in the interview I recommended that she had spoken with her mother's family, that they contacted her aunt specifically, and they told her that Barbara, her mother, wanted to separate from Mike, that he was abusive, and that before she died, she really didn't want to be with him. Later, Sarah herself realized why she didn't know anything about her mother's family and why she didn't have a relationship with them. And that's because Mike had basically controlled her entire life and had prevented her from contacting them. So he controlled everything the way he wanted, and that's how the case was left. It's still unresolved. In 2010, Mike was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the bombs. It had nothing to do with Alissa's mystery, nothing like that, just because of the bombs. Literally, for now there's no more information other than what Alissa's sister can give us. Like I said before, on the Lord and Arts channel, which is linked below in the description, you'll find everything he asked her, the Skype call, everything you want to know. Also, he covered the case in several parts, explaining some of his theories and, I don't know, in a calmer way of looking at it, if you want to check it out. And that's where the case ends for now. I guess, maybe, at some point, who knows how long from now, we might be able to do an update. I've seen myself that in several cases, some YouTubers post, suddenly the following year the truth comes out. So I have hope that we'll find out what really happened to Alissa, and that Mike will finally confess or serve the sentence he deserves for what he did to his daughter. I truly believe my main theory is that he's the one who made her disappear. I don't think she left on her own. To me, the facts don't add up. The story is vague. Cameras are missing, the call she made is missing. Either way, it just doesn't add up. That's where the video ends. Here on the side are my patrons. In case you want to know more about it, or if you want to support me through that page, the link is also in the description. And well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the investigation. Here on the side, you have a new video, and here you have a recommended video. You can subscribe by clicking on my face, and I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.